give some information to all of our presenters. We have today, inshallah, about 9 papers that will be presented within our time that we have now, 11:08 a.m. until 1 p.m. Today. So the time allocate for each of our presenters, it will be around 50 minutes only, and then I will give a cue for 5 minutes before finish. I will raise my hand and I will let you know that we are going to 5 minutes more finishing for our line or timetable for presenting. If we go further for about 2 minutes more or 1 minute more, I will open up my microphone or my mic, and then I will say that we did not, we will finish very soon. So please try our best to keep in our best discipline for a timetable allocated, because inshallah after our time finish we will go through for another session. So hopefully we will not going to going with a long time for not finishing our time allocate for us for each of us. Okay, so without further ado, I think maybe it will be the best inshallah today. Before I think that I cannot did already. I would like to ask that Mr. Ikhwan, did we already record this session, Mr. Ikhwan? Mr. Ikhwan, kita dah record dah ke session ni?
Dah record.
Alright, okay, baik. Terima kasih, Mr. Ikhwan. Okay, without further ado, let us start with our first presenter. That will be sharing first presenter and all of our presenters. You will need to share your own slide. You can click to the share screen, and then after that you can directly share your screen and you can start your presentation. Okay, so we have the first presenters today, inshallah, will be presented by Mr. Muhammad Amir Rafiq bin Rahmat with the title of paper, A Study on 2-Point Discrimination Tactile Sensory for Reading Quran Braille Dots. So please, we are with a warm welcome. I would like to give this floor at this online session for the first presentation to our first presenters. Okay, silakan.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Amir Rafiq bin Rahmat. I am 17 years old, and I'm from College Jenis Insan. And today I want to share about my study, which titled A Study on 2-Point Discrimination Tactile Sensory for Reciting Quran Braille Dot.
Okay.
So this is my research background. The first is blindness. Blindness is the inability to see anything, including light, which serves as one of the dominant disabling societal affecting the visually impaired people and people in their surrounding. This group of society faced many challenges in their daily routine and in their learning process. Despite their challenges, they can mainly depend on tactile sensory and hearing to gather and circling information. Tactile sensory exhibits a favorable solution in explaining the environment and visual content to visually impaired people due to the correspondence between touch and vision. This solution becomes the guidance towards visually impaired by tactile sensation of finger touch to obtain text information from the Braille book. Recently, 1010 Malaysian Science, Technology, Innovation and Economy, stands for MIST, framework has focused on 10 main elements, which including 3D, 4D and 5D printing technology in additive manufacturing industry. The utilization of 3D printing in education industry must be established. Therefore, the development in the education among Muslim Ummah and particularly for visually impaired Muslim in learning Quran must also be emphasized. The two-point discrimination, TPD, is one of the most used neurosensory tests to assess mechanoperception in the clinical setting. Clinical neurosensory testing is performed to evaluate sensory abnormalities. There are three-level routine conducted of tests for the assessment of altered sensation, which is spatiotemporal perception, contact detection, and nociception of temperature. The TPD test is a classical test of the capacity to discriminate the distance between compass points, which is to feel two contacts. This method has been used to measure the recognition capability of tactile touch with two stimulation points to identify if two points are separated or not. So we continue to our problem statements. The first problem is Al-Quran in Braille book form extremely heavy. It makes not portable enough to be carried around easily. The second is Braille Quran books is fragile due to the weight that the backbone of the book need to handle. And the last is current education for Braille are boring to most students and can cause lack in motivation for the visually impaired. Next, we go to our objective is to investigate the effects of each gender and test set of fingers using two-point discrimination tests. As well as we get the result, we want to develop a tool suitable for visually impaired children in reciting Al-Quran based on their finger sensitivity. So this is our methodology. Our project started with development of survey questions. Second, we are applying TPD tests on the respondents. At this part, we apply on different ages, different gender, and different test set. So what are the test set that we used were four fingers, right hand and left hand, which is index finger, middle finger, yeah. And next is we undergo analyzing of result flow, the TPD test. And finally, we develop the tablet braille dots tracing using 3D printing technology. So this is our results and discussion. As you can see, this is flow process on the TPD test. So the test was carried out with their eyes closed at different age and gender. The test subjects were gathered in a room and finger testing was carried out for each individual test subject for 4 different fingers with different test subjects. Each test subject was mentioned on the pressure applied during the testing. The mean value for the most sensitive finger was 2.7 and standard deviation was 1.09. Next, okay, this is the graph for effect gender. As we can see, the green bar, which we represent as female, had the greater sensitivity compared to male for all of the test site. So we can conclude that female have a better finger sensitivity. Next. So the graph summarizes that the test subjects based on age ranging from below 15 up to above 18 years old. The result shows that left index finger was the most sensitive fingers for the test subjects at the age of between 16 and 18, and above 18 with the percentage of 31.7% and 42.9% respectively. However, test subjects below 15 years old showed that their most sensitive finger was right index finger with percentage of 33.3%. Okay, thanks. Okay, yeah, yes, I was about. Okay. This is the 3D model of the tape-like casing that was designed using application Tinkercad software. The tape was then converted into STL file and was sliced using process slicer software, STL file to G-code file. Consequently, the G-code file was used for the 3D process to print the 3D model. The 3D printed tape-like model as shown in figure C and consists of gears that were used to rotate the imprinted hijaiyah braille dots on a paper roll, which was manually inserted into the 3D model. And at the figure D. Okay. So the imprinted paper with different distance of the braille dots of 2 mm, 3 mm, 5 mm, and 6 mm. The distance were chosen after the finger sensitivity test. Results were analyzed as in the figure. And the different test points were then inserted into the 3D printed tape and further used towards the visually impaired children as it served as mobile tool with low-cost production complement with a fun learning approach. Okay, so this the advantage of the tool. First is improve the inequality of learning and memorizing the Quran among visually impaired children and common children. Second, applying advancement technology in developing young generation Muslim educate with Quran knowledge. Next, it is low cost and portable tool, and it can improve children's fine motor skills. So the conclusion is, eventually the finger tactile sensitivity test can be used as a guidance to determine the most sensitivity finger specifically for visually impaired. From this study, it was found that female possessed better finger sensitivity for all the tested fingers as compared to male. However, each shows various findings where each range of age has their own sensitivity. The difference in learning approach may give a different perspective towards visually impaired in learning Quran and shift the paradigm to overcome the challenges of the visually impaired Muslim. Hence, with tactile and braille, this engaging tool is perfect for blind and sighted to enjoy, and consequently for Quran recitation with the addition of braille strip 3D printed cassette for braille Quran, for bringing users interest in learning Al-Quran, which was produced for easy touch and memorized at low cost. So our future planning is to apply the 3D printed tape to the visually impaired children, and our target school is special schools for the needs. For example, Sekolah Kebangsaan Kuala Kubu Baru, Sekolah Kebangsaan Pendidikan Khas Seremban, dan Sekolah Kebangsaan Al-Quran. And that's all from me.
All right. Okay, thank you so much to our first presenter, Mr. Muhammad Amir, with a very good and a brave presentation, I think, for a 17 years old presenters. It was a very good job for your presentation that you have been done in this conference. Hopefully it will be a good drive force for you to be, inshallah, a better presenters in the next conference, inshallah. Okay, let's now continue with our second presenters, Dr. Elina Muhammad Husni, with our topic, Daylight Efficiency in Religious School, a review of visual comfort and energy saving based on the Hafazan setting. Okay, Dr. Elina, floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, I'm sharing my slide.
All right. Okay, Doctor.
Okay, hopefully that everybody can see my slide here.
All right. Okay, it was clear, Doctor.
Yeah. So this is actually one of the paper that I want to highlight in this conference, titled Daylight Efficiency and Energy Saving Lighting to Maximize Students' Hafazan Performance and Visual Comfort, a case research of a selected religious school. So I am from Faculty of Engineering and Built Environment. I think this is the opportunity for me to highlight what is the basis what is the relationship between the daylight and also some sort of the integration of from Akli and Nakli. So this paper is actually 4 of us contribute. It's me, myself, Prof. Associate Dr. Zain Kandar, Dr. Rajanur Shaida from UMS, University Malaysia Sarawak, and also Architect Fadli Arabi from USIN. So the agenda, we will highlighting these 5 main concerns in my slides and the introduction regarding the daylighting. So this is actually, we are combining the philosophy from the Quran Sunnah, from the physics and from the architecture. So the philosophy of illumination and scientific knowledge of light is actually has been developed by previous our Muslim scholars. So this is actually to improve the intensity of daylight in classroom through introducing various innovation design of window. Nowadays, people is highlighting on the daylight itself and on the design itself, but we sometimes neglect how this the knowledge of light from Ibn al-Haytham already proved that light travel in straight lines using scientific method. So from this, we also relate with the Surah An-Nur, light upon light, Allah guides to his light whom he wills. So related to this, this is also associated with the Surah Al-Asham, verse 1, that highlight by the sun and its brightness. That is why we have to appreciate the creator, who is the creator. Allah is the creator for the sunlight. And from the sunlight, from the integration Akli, when we turn to the theory and philosophy, from the physics to architecture. So how this will relate and what to believe? The exploration of scientific knowledge of light had begun from 12th century, where the difference of light intensity had given various shape to forms and make things visible. So this is very benefit not only for the architecture but also the human itself. So the scientific has proved that the significance of light development in the modern world is actually to embrace what is the construction, what is the formation, and how the Islamic principle will reflect the social, culture, and economic values of Muslim society. In this study, this is pretty much very concerned on the process of hafazan. So in this paper, we are looking into how the memorization process, reading and writing tasks from the hafazan will turn to the design of the window, the daylight level, the reduction of glare effect at the setting 300 mm height. The setting of 300 mm height is actually the students with their cross leg, which called rehal in Bahasa, and how we want to compare the workability in the working plane. Working plane is actually at the table area, table height, that is 900 mm table working plane. So this is actually, we are taking the comparison and case study in College Genius Insight University Science Islam Malaysia. So by having this, we are actually promoting and also highlight more on how daylight will contribute to window size and window sills. Window sills is actually the frame of the window, and how this can utilize to get a very good energy efficiency and also visual comfort for human. In this study actually is to identify what is the optimum illuminance level at window wall ratio of 30%, meaning that for all the window, for all the wall, we only get 30% of the opening, and how the task performance at the rehal level and also at the table, normal table level at 900 mm will take into place, and how the daylight will strategies, and this will reduce by 90% of the passive daylight technique applied. So for this optimum level of daylight performance actually will benefit the designer, not only the designer but also the contractor, the developer, and also the architect with how to insert in future design with energy efficiency guideline and provide a sustainable building. So come back to the learning and teaching process in Islamic education. How actually the way and the technique of hafazan memorization at the level 300 at the Rehal level will actually give another reflect the development of human character. It's because the technique of hafazan can be in depth with getting lots significant of the daylight from the window size. And also at the literature review, we also highlight what is the daylighting and performance, why natural daylighting is very important, and this is will benefit the Islamic religious school for Hafazan, especially at learning tasks such as reading and writing Arabic language. So as per studied by Peter Robert 2003, accordingly into natural daylighting, and also from Raja Shaiza 2018, they talk about how the Arabic handwriting per minute will in depth and also will get into the account the daylight performance itself at the range of 300 lux to 500 lux. So at the normal guidelines in formulation standard for lighting, they allocate about 300 lux to 500 lux. But how and why this light will affect the human visual comfort, as we can foresee that from Ibn Haytham, the human visual system is actually requires light as a fundamental resources to function. So human eye is actually the most notable component of the visual system. The moment that a person who read the Quran and tried to memorize it, of course, the daylight will attract their visual stimulus, and from the visual stimulus will transmit the daylight to the optic nerves and transmit to brain and to be processed and analyzed what we are read before this and what we are writing in terms of any writing task. So daylight and human visual discomfort come into picture when the light is insufficient from our window and from the allocation of the seating inside the classroom. So this is also the light intensity will affect our cornea influences. This is actually as per Ibn Haytham is explained to us. He was an Islamic philosopher and contribute to optical knowledge. And from this, we highlighting how the phenomena on the theory, on the physics, which visible light is actually for human, can be read at 400 to 700 nanometer. Beyond this range, so it's actually, we call it as the infrared and also X-ray and ultraviolet, which human cannot access any visual. So with these, I'm referring to Surah An-Nur, that is appreciating Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. His light is like a niche in which there is a lamp. The lamp is in a crystal. So this is Surah An-Nur, verse 35. For the objective of this paper is actually to see the correlation between the illuminance level and distance in a learning space with the Hafazan setting in religious school. Secondly, to explore the most effective working plane. Working plane is actually the level of reading area, reading task level for future classroom design based on Hafazan setting and energy saving in classroom of religious school. So as we can foresee this, the table shows that learning illuminance level for learning space, this is actually, we shall get about 300 to 400 lux. And for classroom, the lighting level is about 300 to 538 lux. This is actually the maximum efficiency for people to do reading tasks. So the space recommended in simulation normally is around 200 lux. So what happens if this is going to be insufficient daylight? So CIE glare index has been produced, a task that a table that shows that how is the working task adjacent surrounding and the ratio of the luminous ratio. Luminous is the brightness behind, the background of our task, the background of our position. So as mentioned by Fadli in 2012, this comfort glare comes into the picture where the impairing the vision of the object, and if we are not into it to do the solution for the daylighting for the discomfort glare, this will affect our psychological and also producing annoyance and distress. This is, we are actually neglecting this area, so that some of the students, some of the people, some of the human will might say the discomfort will attract their ignorance during reading tasks or writing tasks. So in this paper, it's just a very straightforward. There are 3 methodology has been conducted that are field measurement to identify the illuminance level in the classroom. What is the level actually this is actually identified and measured in the classroom. So this is, we are using College Permata Insan. And secondly, we are doing the visual test, which we establish for the students' performance in writing tasks. So we are having a set of students to perceive daylight illumination in the school by having several exercises for visual tests. And lastly, we are going to have a simulation from the software, the computer software, we call it as an integrated environmental solution, virtual environment. So this is, we will analyze with descriptive statistical. Based on the case study on layout of classroom, we selected only 2 rooms there, 2 rooms for case study at floor plan area specifically. And this area is for the students is exercising their reading task and also in their writing task. So this typical room, we identified, we observed that how is the condition, the physical condition of the room. And we can foresee that there are artificial lighting with 2 ceiling mounted fluorescent lamp, and also there are 24 numbers. And at the same time, we can foresee that the first session includes 30 students in each classroom. So we are giving them the task performance. We are conducting at the 2 different height. One is 900 mm. 900 mm is actually our table floor height. And the other one is Hafazan setting at 300 mm. It's actually at the Rehal setting working plane. So I think this is quite interesting, whereby we can foresee that at the end of the day, we can see that different of opening of daylight, opening of the window, and also the frame itself will contribute the direction of daylight from outdoor to indoor. So from this, we can see that how is the room with shading device and the room without shading device will actually achieve the optimal level of daylight distribution in selecting classroom. So we come to the result here. So we can foresee that the average illuminance level in classroom is actually 300 mm working plane. And we can foresee that the acceptable level for students in college Jenis Insans is actually exceeding Malaysian standard. This means that Malaysian standards is need to be improvised, because the stated in national Malaysian standard is only 300 to 500 lux to perform, but the students is actually getting on a good performance, whereby the daylight in distribution achieving more than 400. Is actually 600 to almost 900 mm lux. So when we did our visual test on Hafazan writing task performance, meaning that we are giving them the verse of Quran, then they have to rewrite back, and we can foresee that in terms of the minutes that we provide, the person who are actually at the 300 working plane, meaning that at the Rehal, when they do the task performance, this is actually become more faster when they are doing the Hafazan writing task compared those who are actually 900 mm working plane at the normal table. So we are also adjusting the window height. So from the 300 mm actually at the level of Rehal up to the level of normal table 900 mm. So we can foresee that we are using simulation and the setting of 300 working plane with the IES-BE software. So what we can foresee that from the previous result, we turn it to how the energy efficiency when we are having the maximum opening of the window itself. So in terms of energy saving, the daylight zone and energy saving lighting very much provides the uniformity daylight distribution, meaning that the daylight at all angle in the classroom achieve the sufficiency of daylight. And the result from the simulation shows that daylight solely provides more illumination at 900 lux level. 900 lux level meaning that it's exceeding Malaysian standard. Malaysian standards is actually within 300 to 500 lux. So the values suggest that at this step of the artificial light should be integrated into the daylight and the daylight sensors are placed. So this is to say that daylight fraction happen in the area and the fraction is actually achieved more than 75%. So according to the result, is actually the distance from 1 meter to 3 meters at the sitting area from the window. So the other strategy for the designer and for the architects, we are thinking to have the sensor, meaning that when the illuminance level is achieving the standard and also the acceptable illuminance level, the dimming system for the lighting, for the artificial light will operate. So meaning that we do not use anymore the artificial, it's automatically shut down. So turn off the light. So we are fully utilized on the daylight. So on this study on the different of distance from window, we are achieving the sufficient illuminance level by having the optimum window size, actually about 70%, and we can have an energy saving.
Doctor,
So
I'm sorry, Doctor, maybe you can a little bit compress the presentation, Doctor. Thank you.
All right. Okay, thank you. So we can foresee that this is a comparison between a room with and without the opening and also the overhang. Overhang is a shading outside the window. And in terms of energy efficiency, after we get the 30% of the percentage opening of the window, we can foresee that there is a saving about 30%. So at the end of the day, we can see that the result of window to wall ratio, the distance of the setting, and also the level of performance at 300 mm, which is the Rehal, is the best area to get sufficient daylight. So from this, I will conclude that the study evidence that the optimum illuminance level which support reading and writing activities are in the range of 300 to 500 lux at 900 working plane with 900 mm window sill height, and the expectation for visual performance at 300s and between 300s and 900s. This will provide more glare and this can improve with window to wall ratio. The sizing of window is about 30% to achieve estimation of energy saving. And of course, lastly, the Hafazan setting that reach the optimum illuminance level only at the working plane. Meaning that at the end of the day, even though the students find out that the level 300 mm is the best, but the sufficient of daylight is also getting a good daylight distribution at 900 mm level of table. So by that, thank you from me. Alhamdulillah, we have finished this investigation and also the research for this topic.
Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much, Dr. Elina, for
Yeah.
the presentation. It was a very good outcome, I'm sure, for the findings of your FRGS grant, inshallah, Doctor.
Yes.
And yeah, inshallah, I will also before we go further for our third presenters, I would like to inform to all of our participants, for those who would like to ask any question. You can type your questions in the chat in our Zoom in here. So that inshallah I will read the question at the end of our session. Yeah. Okay, so now let's go for our third presenters, Mr. Siti Aini Amira Muhammad Amri, with the topics of water as green solvent in Al-Quran, Quranic thematic exegesis analysis. So please welcome Mr. Siti Aini for the presentation.
Can you see the slides?
Yes, it was clear.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Siti Aini Amira Muhammad Amri. I am the student of Master of Islamic Science from Center of Graduate Studies. Okay, do you know that the usage of volatile organic compounds as a solvent in the chemical processes may cause harmful to the environment and cause environmental pollutions to land, water, and air? So, therefore, in 1998, Paul Anastas had developed a new concept of chemistry, which called as green chemistry. And apart from that, Islamic knowledge is believed to support this finding. And so, this working paper will explain on water as green solvents in Quran based on the Quranic thematic exegesis. It is actually an Islamic framework in solving environmental issues by integrating both Naqli and Aqli-based knowledge. So I will start with the background of the research. So basically, the environmental pollutions that happen all around the world had encouraged the scientists to propose greener chemical processes using the principles of green chemistry. But in this working paper, we want to highlight a holistic approach of this topic based on the Islamic framework. And for this working paper, we focus on the Quranic thematic exegesis. So basically, what is actually a solvent? What is actually the role of solvents in chemical processes? A solvent is a chemical compound that dissolves solid solutes and enhances the reactivity of the chemical reactions. In short, the usage of solvents in the chemical reactions may enhance the chemical reactions, and the chemical processes will be conducted in a shorter time. So the key features of the green solvents has five, as mentioned as by Clark in 2018. First, it may play a dual action. Dual action means the solvents may also act as reagent as well. So it is important as we can lower the cost of the chemical processes. Second one is to raise the quality of product in the end of the chemical processes, reduce synthetic stage, reduce byproduct creation, and it also may improve and may reduce the post-treatment after the chemical processes conducted, and finally to improve the chemical separation. So what is actually the water molecule? So basically, there are three unique physical properties of the water molecule. First is the strong hydrogen bonding, and then second one is the hydrophobic effects. The hydrophobic effects allow the molecules segregates from the hydrophobic molecules. And the third one, it may resist change in temperature. At high temperature, water may evaporate and boils, and at lower temperature, it may freeze. The three unique properties conclude the potential of water to be a good green solvent that may improve the chemical properties that may improve the chemical reactions and also protect the environment at the same time. Why? Because water is a form of renewable sources, and it is in abundant quantity and can be gained all around the world, and also the stable molecules may react with various chemical compounds, regardless organic and also inorganic compounds. So in chemistry, there are 5 main examples of the chemical processes that involve water as the chemical solvents to improve the chemical separations. First is the catalytic activities, or also known as the green catalysis. Second one is the analytical chemistry, organic synthesis, chemical extraction, and also the functionalization of carbohydrates. So, the facts about Quran. Quran is the main reference of the Islamic knowledge, and tafsir or exegesis was one of the first Islamic studies to emerge since the prophetic history. The revealed knowledge from Quran does not limit to only Islamic knowledge, but also explain about the modern contemporary knowledge, or also as we know as science. It may encourage knowledge integration between the modern science and also the Islamic knowledge, and also within all the disciplines that contain all in academic world. So basically, why this research focus on Quranic semantic exegesis? So basically, Quranic semantic exegesis may develop a comprehensive understanding in reviewing contemporary topics, especially related to Western knowledge or related to natural science. So the Quranic semantic exegesis will be a bridge to connect between the modern science and also the Islamic knowledge, and may prove the alignment of both dimensions over a similar conceptual but in a holistic manner. Why? Because it may explain both physical and also spiritual elements of the topic chosen. So how can we conduct the Quranic semantic exegesis? First, we need to choose a topic. The topic chosen must relate to the integration of Naqli and Aqli knowledge. Second, we need to analyze the related Quranic verses. In Quranic semantic exegesis, only those related verses that will be chosen. And the third one, we need to analyze those verses through chosen tafsir. So in Quranic semantic exegesis, normally we choose more than one tafsir method. Why? Because we want to highlight the agreement between the two different tafsir methods that we had chosen earlier. And the fourth one, we need to identify themes using coding methods of those verses. And final step is to conduct the induction and deduction method to draw the conclusion of all those steps before, those steps earlier. So in this working paper, I had highlight 4 Quranic verses that related to the topic. First verse is, and we have sent down rain from the sky in a measured amount and settled in the earth. By the agreement of Tafsir Ibn Kathir and Tafsir Al-Maududi, they explain about the power of Allah that had sent down the rain to the earth in due measure, meaning according to what is needed. So there is no such thing that the water is insufficient on the earth, and all creatures on earth may benefit water through the rain that has sent down by Allah. And then Al-Maududi also had asked people to observe about the power of Allah that has sent down the rain, and with the proportion or ratio with one oxygen atoms and 2 hydrogen atoms. And he asked about he also asked us to think that no one else can do that except Allah. The second verse that explained about how Allah had purified water before sending down the rain. So the purified water means water is pure, and nothing can make it impure before it coming to the earth. It may also benefit people by purify other things on earth too. And water is also known as a pure and free from all sorts of impurities, germs, and also poison. The third verses explain on how water is can be a path for us to worship Allah by observing the rain that had been sent down to us. And then the last verse focus on the abundance of water on earth. And also the abundance of water has been used for abundance blessings metaphorically for human life, and habitation depends on water. So basically, to summarize these verses, so basically there are two elements that have been focused in this research. First is physical elements, and second is spiritual elements. The first physical elements is about the abundance of water. The abundance of water is because water is one form of renewable sources. It allows water to be in numerous organic and inorganic reactions, and it avoid restricted resources issues which may giving problem to any experiment or industrial activities, especially in large-scale production. Second one is on the cleanliness and purity of water. The purity and cleanliness of water that has sent down to the earth does not contain any harmful chemicals, low in toxicity, and hazards upon usage. So it requires a lower cost in the usage and the treatment of the chemical waste. So it also doesn't demand on pre-treatment processes too. And after the chemical processes, there will demand on low amount of post-treatment after the chemical process is conducted. And for the spiritual elements, first is about the power of Allah that creates water. Based on the agreement of both tafsir methods, the concluded correlation is to count blessings as the path to worship Allah. And given an honor and responsibility to be a caliph on earth, human beings should benefit water and protect the environment from any harm. We need to bring up justice to the environment as it deserves to play their role well too. So how the justice will create it is we need to protect our environment and shouldn't allow any form of action that may harm our environment. As the nature, it's our responsibility for us to manage it well. And choosing water as a good solvent, as a green solvent, is the best choice. And Quranic semantic exegesis also is a good platform to bridge the modern science and also to relate the Islamic knowledge to create a holistic approach by applying the Islamic framework. So, in summary, water is known as green solvent and proven by Quran through the Quranic semantic exegesis. So, it basically explains both physical and spiritual elements to explain the topic and portray the integration of both knowledge disciplines. So, as the conclusion, I would suggest that more research on the Islamic science using the Quranic semantic exegesis as the platform or the bridge, so that we may explain more about the modern research and without and acknowledge the contribution of Western to the knowledge. And also at the same time, as a Muslim scientist, we need to know that in Islamic knowledge also explains about the modern science, but in a holistic way. So that's all from me. Thank you.
All right, thank you also for you, Mrs. Siti Aini Amira, for a good presentation as well about water as a green solvent in Al Quran. We jump in our discussion, start from the 2-point discrimination tactile sensory for the Quran Braille. After that, we go for our visual comfort and energy saving based on the Hafazan setting. After that, we go for another topic, how water become one of the green solvent in Al Quran. And now let me also welcome our next presenters, Mrs. Zati Nazifa binti Abdul Rahim, where she will discuss with us, or she will present to us analysis on the book of Al Sunnah wa Makanatuha fi At-Tashri' Al-Islami by Mustafa Al-Asibai. Okay, dipersilakan dengan segala hormatnya.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi.
I would like to share my screen. So I hope everyone can see the screen.
Yes,
and I hope my voice clear enough.
Okay, enough. Good.
Alhamdulillah.
All right. Okay, Zati.
First of all, thank you to Dr. Wahida, to all lecturers and presenters. My name is Zati Nazifah binti Abdul Rahim from Faculty of Quran and Sunnah Studies, USIM, and the title for my paperwork, Analysis on the Book of Al-Sunnah wa Makanatuha fi al-Tashri' al-Islami by Mustafa Al-Sibai. So, as in the title, this paperwork or article is about the book written by Mustafa Al-Sibai, a great Islam scholar. So we will go through a little bit about the biography of the author, then about the book, and lastly the result on the analysis on the perspective of the author towards enemies of Sunnah, because this book mainly written to rebut lies and arguments from the enemies. So this study focus more about the opponent of Sunnah. So here a little bit about a biography of the author. He grew up well in an honorable Muslim family. Since young age, he has been performed great and he learned a lot from his own father, Sheikh Husni Abu Hassan Al-Sibai, who was a well-known scholar in his state. And apart from getting formal education, he also seek knowledge from great Muslim scholars in Syria. And here are among his teachers. And then he further his study in PhD at Al-Azhar, and he began to join Ikhwanul Muslimin together with Hassan al-Banna, and later actively joined and led movement until he actually get arrested few times. But he still continued to be active as a lecturer and wrote lots of books before he died because of his chronic illness. His name is well known, and many of his work continue to be used as a reference by Muslims around the world until today. And here are some of the books written by him, including the book that will be discussed here, As-Sunnah wa Makanatuha. Alright. About the book, here are some reasons why he wrote the book. Actually, the book was his PhD thesis, and he only shares with close circle of students. But several chapters from this book have also been published as articles in several Islamic magazines. Many readers wrote to him asking for the publication of his writing, but he postponed because he still want to improve his work. Then Adwa ala As-Sunnah al-Muhammadiyah by Abu Rayah was published. This book actually attacked the credibility of hadith and its narrators. So his friends and colleagues, Al-Sibai friends, they insist for Al-Sibai to publish his book and expose the falsehoods that Abu Rayah tried to spread. So Al-Sibai agreed to submit his work for printing and retain its contents, except for a few refinements, correction that he managed to make. Then the book received various positive reaction, and not only well received by scholars and academic students, but also by Muslim community in general, because his book is really easy to be understand. And here about the book, here are some reasons why he wrote the book. Actually, the book was here. Here are the other reason for him writing the book. The incident with Dr. Ali Hassan Abdul Qadir. He also become one of the factors Al-Sibai produced this work, because Dr. Abdul Qadir teach his class by referencing to Ghaziher, an Orientalist. So it is really opposing until Al-Sibai decided to deliver a lecture on the topic to explain the truth. Besides, Al-Sibai also had met with many people from the Muslim world who were influenced by the ideas of the Orientalists. So he wrote this book as attempt to persuade them with the truth and to remove any doubts about Islam. So these are the main reason why Al-Sibai writing this book, produce these works. And then I want to talk about the difficulties in writing the book. Al-Sibai went through some difficulties while composing this great book. The lack of reference books and difficulty to meet with supervisor, but he still successfully submitted his PhD thesis before he published the book. But when the first edition published, he suffering from a chronic illness which little bit had affected his works. He always wanted to discuss more in his work and add more related topics, but he never got the time. Although he became extremely weak because of his illness, he still tried to polish his work and continue to do so until he died. He also intended to add a third appendix, but he died before he was able to complete the third appendix. And let's continue with the contents and division of chapters in the book. Sibain divided his book into 3 parts and concluded with a biographical appendix section. The first part or the first section, the meaning of the Sunnah and how it was transmitted and recorded. He outlines clearly the various stages of development in history of Sunnah in early Islamic century, from the time Hadith was transmitted through oral speech until Hadith was officially written and recorded. Then he explained the factors of Hadith fabrication and also detailed the history of the great achievement of Hadith scholars. He also listed various branches of the field of Hadith knowledge as a result of studies and efforts from scholars of Hadith. And then in the second section, various doubts raised concerning the Sunnah over the centuries. In this section, Sibain discussed about enemies of Islam who have attacked Hadith and its narrators from earlier time. And after he stated their claims, these enemies' claims, he proceeded to present arguments to answer all the arguments to prove their lies. And while in the last part, the third section, the ranking of the Sunnah in Islamic legislation, Al-Sibai discussed in more detail the position between Sunnah and Quran and the relationship between these two sources of law. And lastly, he concluded his writing with a very useful appendix in which he discussed about Al-Imam of the 4 mazhab and Imam lil Kutub As-Sittah, the 6 books. And Al-Sibai not only focused on their biographies, but also discussed the approach used in inferring the law for Hadith. So, alright. Now, we will go through Mustafa Al-Sibai perspective towards Sunnah opponents. So, here are a list of Sunnah enemies discussed by Al-Sibai. Start with the Shia and Khawarij until the certain contemporary writers who reject Sunnah. Alright, as we know, first Shia and Khawarij, they have negative views about Sahaba, and the conflict had led to an assault against Sunnah and even rejecting authentic hadith. We know Shia reject hadith, but they only accept hadith that related to their Imam, Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, of course. And Khawarij, they reject hadith narrated by anyone who participated with Sayyidina Ali or Muawiyah. And Shia also invent lie. They fabricate a hadith about Sayyidina Ali, and because of this their opinions and doubts, they actually give great influence to the Orientalists and other enemies of Islam. Same goes to Mu'tazilah and Mutakallimin, where in his book Al-Sibai discussed about them. There are 22 subsects, actually 22 subsects within Mu'tazilah. There are lots of subsects, and most of them reject Ahad Hadith, and also some of them reject even Mutawatir Hadith. As we know, Mutawatir Hadith, Mutawatir is the highest ranking of Hadith in Hadith tradition, but they even reject that. And Al-Sibai also claim that when Mu'tazilah raised up about the status of Sahaba, this actually opened door for certain Orientalists to attack them as well. And this all of them gave great influence to other enemies of Islam to continually attack Hadith. And then those from the early centuries who reject Sunnah legislative status, they rejected either the Ahad Hadith or those Hadith that did not explain and did not affirm what is in the Quran. In other words, those hadiths that legislated independent rulings that are not found in the Quran rejected by this group. So Al-Sibai'i discussed about them, and he quotes more. He claimed that Imam Al-Shafi'i as the first one who discussed about this group. And then same goes to the contemporary personalities who reject Sunnah, where Al-Sibai'i focus only one contemporary personality, which is Dr. Taufik Siddiqui, who only accepting Quran and totally rejecting Hadith. And then those who reject the validity of Ahad narration, the argument of those rejecting Ahad are clearly refuted in this book. And actually, scholars had mentioned many proof in their books regarding Ahad hadith, and all of the proof had clearly refute and rebut all these arguments. And then the Orientalists, where Al-Sibai'i share his perspective about Orientalists, especially the one regarded as the Sheikh of Orientalists, Ines Qazihar. Al-Sibai'i pointed out that he wrote about Orientalists before he had the opportunity to meet them in person to discuss their opinion when he visited various universities in Europe. So in the visit, he became convinced that a great danger brought by these Orientalists actually to the Islam heritage. So he wrote this book, and in this book he explained how Orientalists had dominated Islam study in the West, influencing Islamic writers, and Al-Sibai'i focused on discussing about Ghazihar argument regarding Sunnah and rebut all of his lies. And lastly, certain contemporary writers who reject Sunnah, Al-Sibai'i described them as so-called Muslim because the student of Orientalists and their way of attack is neither clear nor direct, but they direct offensive from Orientalists before them. They are more vicious from their pioneer. And Al-Sibai'i focused on discussing about Ahmad Amin with his book Fajar al-Islam, and Abu Rayah, the writer of Adwa al-Sunnah al-Muhammadiyah. So Al-Sibai'i critiqued their books and claimed that their books has no scholarly value or whatsoever, and conclude that the book was not written on accepted methods of scholarly research. And in this book, in this chapter, Al-Sibai'i had clearly refute all the enemy's lies, all the enemy's argument, and that's why this book is very good. And based on this discussion, it can be concluded that Mustafa Al-Sibai'i is a figure of Islamic scholars who is very broad in his knowledge and remains firm in defending the purity of Sunnah Nabawiyah. So this book, Sunnah wa Makanatuha fi al-Tashri' al-Islami, is the result of his work, which can be used as one of the proof of his greatness and knowledge. So every argument attached was very strong to refute every baseless allegation from the enemies of Islam. So that will be my conclusion, and here are some references used to follow this article. And with that, I think that's enough, and thank you so much for the opportunity. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Mrs. Zati Nazifa, thank you so much for also a very good sharing about the analysis of the books of Sunnah by our Sayyid Mustafa Al-Sibai'i. Inshallah, hopefully it will be a very good knowledge to all of us who listen to this talk today. So now let's continue with our next presenters, Dr. Shahnur Iman bin Abdul Rahman, with the topics of the paper that will be presented today, the benefit of rain on electrical energy delivery. So please welcome Dr. Shahnur Iman. The floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah. Doctor.
I'm Abdullah Rayyan, a master student at the Faculty of Engineering in Osim from Gaza, Palestine. Okay. My supervisor is Dr. Shahrul Iman Abdul Rahman.
Okay.
Inshallah ta'ala, today I will present the benefit of rain on electrical energy delivery. Our presentations outline for today is we have introductions and objective, literature review, and simple mathematical calculations, and the impact of the rain on electrical delivery. And at the end, we have the conclusion and references. First of all, actually, the electricity is very important nowadays because of the high modernization. And the electricity is transferred actually to consumer via the transmission line. And the demand on the transmission lines actually is very high. And also the most existing transmission lines facilities are actually old because it has been installed more than 30 years ago. And it may not be suitable to meet the requirement of the high demand nowadays. So if we are going to talk about the solution, the easiest solution is build a new transmission line network. But this actually will impact the economic and environment. So our proposal is actually to utilize the rain to improve the electrical delivery. The aim of this article, actually, the aim of this paper, sorry, is to integrate between the Islamic and non-relevant knowledge in the electricity energy industry. The objective for the paper is to perform a simple mathematical study and to highlight the impact of the rain on the electrical power delivery. Also, one of the objectives is to enhance the traditional understanding of the benefit of the rain. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in Surah Al-A'raf, ayah 56, بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولا تفسدوا في الأرض بعد إصلاحها وادعوه خوفا وطمعا إن رحمة الله قريب من المحسنين. The tafsir for this ayah is actually very nice tafsir. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked to not spread the corruptions in the land after it has been set up by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah has asked to call Allah and pray Allah with hope and fear. And this actually, if we want to compare it with the rain is actually received at a certain measurement. However, it may reduce the conductor's temperature and improve the transmission line, electrical on power delivery. For the literature review from the Quranic view, we have two ayah, one from Surah Al-Zukhruf, ayah number 11. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والذي نزل من السماء ماء بقدر فأنشرنا به بلدة ميتا كذلك تخرجون. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who sent down the rain from the sky in a perfect measure, with which actually give life to lifeless land and dead land. And so you are the people actually will be brought from the grave. In the second ayah from Surah An-Nur, in the ayah number 43, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, ألم ترى أن الله يزجي سحابا ثم يؤلف بينه ثم يجعله ركاما فترى الودق يخرج من خلاله وينزل من السماء من جبال فيها من برد فيصيب به من يشاء ويصرفه عمن يشاء يكاد سنا برقه يذهب بالأبصار. The tafsir for this ayah is don't see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who gently drive the cloud, then he joined them together and then turned them into a mass, and thereafter you see the raindrop. It's actually the view of this is by integrating the relevant knowledge, naqli, and the non-relevant aqli knowledge. On this topic, actually, the paper would shift the traditional understanding of the benefit of the rain and highlight the advantages of the rain for the electrical energy. For the electrical energy delivery process. On the literature review for the electrical power delivery calculations, the heat balance equation is used actually to calculate the electrical power delivery. According to the equation, Bj plus Bs plus Bi equal to Bc plus Br plus Bw, which is actually presenting the joule heating for the Bg and the solar heating for Bs. Bi is presenting the corona heating and Bc convective cooling, and for the Br is actually the radiative cooling, and the Bw will be evaporative cooling. Interestingly, the concept of the heat balance equation is very close to the idea of wasatiyya that is widely used in Islam. So the wasatiyya here is actually how we balance the heat. In a case study, actually, on the left side, there was a data collecting which has been done during a non-rainy condition. From the data actually collected is actually showing the solar heat is equal to 22.4 watt, and the convective cooling is BC equal to 157.3 watt, and the radiative cooling, the PR equal to 69.73 watt. The impact of corona heating actually and the evaporative cooling are negligible. On the other hand, the electrical delivery is given as a result of the case study. The I equations, I over 2 is equal to the 1476 ampere. Another case study actually has been done during rainy condition. We have rainy condition as we can see on the graph on the right side. Rainy condition case number 1 and case number 2. In the case number 1 for the rainy condition, it was given to us is 10 watt, and the case number 2 is 20 watt. The difference between the condition 1 and 2 could be due to the intensity of the rain, actually. From the graph also, it has been found that during the rainy condition case number 1, there is additional 36 ampere, which is 2.4% of the electricity could be achieved. And during the rainy condition of case number 2, there is an additional 71 ampere, which is actually 4.8% of the electricity could be achieved. At the end of this presentation, actually, the rain is a priceless gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to humankind, and is very significant and critical in providing life to the land. Also, the rain could potentially provide up to 5% extra electricity, which is critical to reduce the operational stress on the existing transmission line structure. The study has provided a new dimensions to understand rain in giving life in electrical power delivery. That's all for me.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ryan, for a good presentation about the topic on rain that become one of the good indicator or good factors to adding on the electrical energy delivery. Inshallah, we hope that you will produce a very good finding for Ummah to share to Ummah, inshallah, for your research. Okay, now let's go further with our next presenters by Mr. Ahmad Solihin Sirajuddin with the topics of interpretation in topics regarding insects in Quran in comparison between Tafsir Ibn Kathir and Tafsir Al-Azhar. Okay, silakan Mr. Ahmad Solihin Sirajuddin.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi.
I'll start sharing my screen now. Okay, my name is Ahmad Solihin bin Sirajuddin. I'm from East Coast Environmental Research Institute in UNIZA. Today I'm going to present about the interpretation on insects mentioned in the Quran, comparison between Tafsir Ibn Kathir and Tafsir Al-Azhar. First of all, we go to introduction. First, what is insects? Insects are organisms from the class Insecta, where by general definition are arthropods, which means they have exoskeletons. They also have three major parts of body, which is head, thorax, and abdomen, and also three pairs of legs. So therefore, another arthropods like spiders, Al-Ankabut will not be included in this study. Some insects are mentioned in the Quran with very specific detail like their role and their habitats, their production, and some insects are mentioned purely as a parable. Despite many Quranic study has been done in way of science, however, scientific facts in Quran remain unexplored, especially in topic regarding insects. Also, there are very different kind of methods in interpretation of Al-Quran, such as Tafsir bil-Ma'sur, which is interpretation based on other verses in the Quran or Hadith. And also we have also Tafsir bil-Ra'yi, which based on rationality. Since Tafsir bil-Ra'yi is based on rationality, which is the experience and knowledge of the exegetes, there is possibility that Tafsir bil-Ra'yi will extract more scientific information about the interpretation of insects in the Quran. So for the objective of the studies, first is to explore more scientific knowledge in Quran perspective in topic regarding insects. And then we also want to compare the interpretation of topics mentioned insect in different methodology of interpretation, which is Tafsir bil-Ra'yi and Tafsir bil-Ma'sur. And then we also want to suggest possible Quranic studies regarding scientific knowledge that can be done in the future. First of all, for the method, for the first step, we will see what insects mentioned in the Quran. For this, we look back into Quranic thematic studies regarding animals, insects, and Quran from the past study using Web of Science and Google Scholar. And then after we found what insect has been mentioned, we compare the interpretation based on Tafsir bil-Ma'sur and Tafsir bil-Ra'yi. We will be using Tafsir Ibn Kathir as the representative for Tafsir bil-Ma'sur, and Tafsir Al-Azhar will be used to represent Tafsir bil-Ra'yi. Although there are some part where both exegetes actually use Tafsir bil-Ra'yi and also Tafsir bil-Ma'sur. And then for the conclusion, we will answer back the objective that have been mentioned before. Then here is the insects mentioned in the Quran. First, we have ants in Surah Al-Naml verses 18, bees in Surah An-Nahl verses 68 until 69, and then flies from Surah Al-Hajj verses 73, mosquitoes from Surah Al-Baqarah verses 26, Al-Kummal and locusts from Surah Al-A'raf verses 133, and then locust is mentioned for the second time in Surah Al-Qamar verses 7, and then termites from Surah Al-Sabah verses 14, and then moths from Surah Al-Qari'ah verses 4. And then is the interpretation of insect mentioned in the Quran by both exegetes. First, for ants, Ibn Kathir does not mention any specific detail about the ants, but rather he just relate about the ants about the next verses with Sulaiman smile when he sees the ant mentioned about the approaching of his army, which means he just conclude that Sulaiman understand what the ant understand that the Sulaiman army is approaching. No, I mean Sulaiman understand what the insect is saying, that the army is approaching. And then for the Hamka, first he also mentioned the same as Ibn Kathir, and then he added more information about how the ant that Sulaiman army is actually an explorer ant, which also he also described that about how ants colony find their food, which is first the explorer ants will scatter around and find any kind of food. once any of the explorer ants find the food, they will return to the colony and recruit more ants in order to gather the foods together. And then for the bees, there are actually many more details about the bees. However, because of the limitation of the words and the pages, we decided that we are going to take the interpretation regarding the habitat of the bees and also the production of the bees. First, from the habitats, both Ibn Qasir and Hamka mention about where the bees can be found anywhere inside the rock, inside the ground, inside the tree, and also on the trees. And then Ibn Qasir mentions specifically about the hexagonal structure of the honeycomb. This is also counted as tafsir Durra'i. And then Hamka described about specific tree where specific bee always nest on, which is the tree is Coempacia excelsa, and the bees that always nesting on it is Apis dorsata, where in Southeast Asia we call it as tualang, and that is where many people in Southeast Asia gather honey, called as madu tualang. And then both of them also describe that the different color of the honey is depending what the bee has eaten. And then for the flies, both Ibn Qasir and Hamka mentioned fly as parable. This is about the verses where Allah mentioned to those non-believers, to those that worship other than Allah, that even they gather all the scholars in the world, they can never invent a fly. And then after that, Allah mentioned that human cannot take back what has been taken by the flies. Ibn Qasir interpret this literally, which is human cannot take back what has been taken by fly, like food and all. But Hamka described that what has been taken by the fly is actually human health, which is very, very logical if you think about it, because flies is also a vector for many kind of disease and illness. And then for mosquitoes, both of the passages interpreted as parable and also related back to the verses about the flies, which means because the non-believers asked why use fly as parable or any other kind of insects, and then Allah answered by your question that it doesn't matter whichever parable they have used, because for those who think, they will know what the content that Allah want to say. But for those non-believer, no matter whatever kind of variable that has been used, they can never see what try to be said in the verses. And then for locusts, we have two verses, which is the first verses is from Surah Al-A'raf about the disaster, and then the second verse is about the parable about the condition of human during the hereafter. For the first verses, both of them mention that locust is a plague that destroys all vegetation. And then for the parable, Ibn Qasir mentioned that the parable for locust is when human answering the call of the Creator, they will gather together and go to the same way to the Creator. Meanwhile, Hamka mentioned it, the parable is that the human that is answering the calling of the Creator, where the rise from the dead is just like a locust that just grow its wing. And then for Kummal, there are many kind of definition of Kummal. Since that's why we cannot find the definite insects that are meant by Kummal. Ibn Qasir mentioned Kummal as growing bug, and then he mentioned another interpretation by Ibn Manzur that Kummal is a small locust that does not have wing. And then Hamka, he relates Kummal to Pianggang or Hamawereng, which is referring to rice pest that specialize in Indonesia. And then when we look into Lisan al-Arab, even in Lisan al-Arab by Ibn Manzur also mentioned many contradictory definitions, such as there are definitions that say Kummal is a insect that have wings, and then there are other definitions that say Kummal is actually insect that does not have wings. Therefore, we decided that Kummal need to be studied more in order to find the definite meaning of it. And then for termites, there are no scientific information other than describing the word as termites, because in the verses it's mentioned is as Dabbatul Ar. And then Ibn Qasir mentioned that Dabbatul Ar referring to Arodah, and then mention the meaning of Arodah is inside that it woods. Hamka also said almost the same as the Ibn Qasir for termites, where the Dabbatul Ar also refers to Arodah, which means a creature that consumes wood. And then for moths, both Ibn Qasir and Hamka mentioned it as parable, which is the condition of human during the hereafter, which means that human will be scattered around not knowing what to do, just like a moth. And then for the conclusion, some insects are mentioned with many details, such as the bees and the ants, while some are mentioned purely as parables, such as the flies and also the moths. Tafsir Biroi will indeed give more scientific insight on the Quranic verse depending on the experience and knowledge of the exegetes. You can see that even Ibn Qasir can tell some scientific knowledge about the bees, which is the hexagonal structure of the bee nest. And then Hamka mentioned more about more scientific insight on the insect based on the culture which is in Southeast Asia, such as Hamawereng, and then also about the Madu Tualang. Then we will see more possible future studies. More study can be done regarding bees. There are many kind of studies regarding bees, but most of the time, the study is focused on the honey itself, about the properties of the honey, but no one has even done in-depth study about the habitat of the bees and also the behavior of the bees related to the verses. And then for the verses in Surah Al-A'raf, verses 133, the correlation of tufan, locusts, kumal and frogs and blood can be studied, because it mentioned in such specific arrangement. It started with tufan and then locusts, kumal, frogs and blood. This study can be done in order to find the correlation between all of them. And then lastly, the study regarding the word kumal to find the definite meaning of it, whether there is certain insect or it just term referring to any pest that destroy any kind of grain. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you.
Right. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Ahmad Salihin. With also the discussion has focusing on the interpretation of the insect in Al-Quran, which is very good sharing as well. So now let's go further with our Dr. Muhammad Zalirizal Zakaria with the topics of presentation today: self-adjustment experience in quarantine center, a phenomenological study of person under surveillance during the pandemics of COVID-19. Okay, dipersilakan Dr. Muhammad Zalirizal untuk membentangkan findingsnya. Silakan, Doktor.
Thank you, Chairman. Let me share first. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin sayyidina wa nabiyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi washabbihi ajma'in. Qala rabbi fi sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Qala syai'un mu'allifu rahimallahu ta'ala wa nafa'ana bihi wa fi 'ilmihi fi darin amin. Ladies and gentlemen, participants of SWAT 7th SWAT 2021. I will now present small research that was done on self-adjustment experience in the quarantine center. It's a phenomenological study during the early stages of COVID-19. As we have known to ourselves, the pandemic of COVID-19 started since December 2019 from China. it is a coronavirus disease, or it is being acronym as COVID-19 by the WHO, and it has becoming pandemic throughout the world, and it is believed that one of the effective way of protecting or restoring the public health during the early stage was using the quarantine method. The impact of quarantine depends on how individuals adjusted themselves during the quarantine process. This research have tried to explore the experience of person under surveillance, or is termed PUS. During the early stage, there are two terms that have been used, PUS and PUI. PUS is person under surveillance, PUI is person under investigation. PUS will be going quarantine period. Within the quarantine procedure, different countries have different procedure. I was involved as a mental health support team in one of the quarantine center those days. And this research has tried to understand how the PUS adjusts mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. From the Islamic perspective, according to Al-Shari in 2020, about 1400 years ago, Prophet Muhammad SAW has narrated that if you hear an outbreak of plague in your land, do not enter it. But if the plague breaks out in a place while you are in it, do not leave the place. Hadith narrated by Bukhari 5728. Within this idea, the quarantine process have been done in most of the country. For example, in Malaysia, when a person who came back from abroad, they need to be quarantined at least 14 days during the early period. This research was done within that period. It is a qualitative research using a phenomenological method. Due to the new norms, the data collection was using telephone interview. We cannot do face-to-face interview those days. It applied the phenomenological bracketing as the method. And as you know, in a qualitative research, the researcher is the primary instrument in getting the data. It is done to answer two research questions, but for the matter of this presentation, I only share one research question, that is, what are the experience faced by the PUS during the quarantine procedure in a quarantine center? For the finding and the discussions of the research, there are two themes that is being explored from the research. Number one is self-adjustment, and number two is about acceptance. The sub-themes of self-adjustment have brought us to the idea of time management during the quarantine, the way to cope challenges during the quarantine, and the way to adjust them yourself during the quarantine. And the themes of acceptance have brought us for three more sub-themes: the preparation before the quarantine, the overview about the quarantine before the quarantine period, and how they are grateful within the facilities provided in a quarantine center. For self-adjustment, time management during quarantine, when you are quarantined, it is, for some of the person under surveillance, it is more than being in a prison. As my experience and within the research, some of the PUS has mentioned that this is more than a prison. In a prison, you can go here and there, but in a quarantine center, you must stay in your room for 14 days, and you can go out, or people who want to come to you, who will serve foods for you, can only put the food outside of your room doors. It is important that during a quarantine period, you have limited resources. You cannot go out from your room totally. It is totally inhibited for you to come out of your room. So you need to develop a personal time management mechanism. The PUS need to develop their personal time management mechanism so that they can ensure their daily life runs smoothly and productively. In adjusting to this during the early period of quarantine, some of the PUS have some difficulties whereby they for us as a normal individuals, we don't tend to stay in a room the whole day unless you are very sick or you are bedridden. There's nobody in this world who stay in his room the whole day. But for this time, you need to stay and you need to think about what you should do in your room all alone. What you should do. So there are needs to develop a personal management, time management for this purpose. And you need to cope challenges. The resurgence of disease increased the mental health implication during this quarantine period. People will easily get anger. People will easily get anxious. People will easily develop their depressed level. So when you are all alone in your room, in a hotel that is not familiar to you, you are not in a room in in the comfort of your personal home. Those days, you are in a room that you are alone, lonely, and you are not familiar to that specific room. So the felt of loneliness, the boredom that you develop is some challenge for the PUS during the quarantine period. So some of them try to connect with their family to overcome these challenges. The connection can only be made online. They can call, they can have video call. Luckily, I need to mention this, luckily that this pandemic occurs during this time. I think if it occurs 20 years back, when we have only the normal phone, those days, some of us are using the SMS only. We cannot see, we cannot hear, we can only hear voices, we cannot see videos and things like that. So it's difficult for us. And for example, like what we are having now, if the pandemic happened 20 or maybe 10 years back, we cannot have such a conference whereby we are here at the comfortness of our home and still we are presenting a paper, right? And for self-adjustment also, there is a difficulty in adjusting themselves, especially the early stages, as I mentioned. The adaptation is quite difficult. They tend to show their anger the first few days until if we foresee it in the Muslim way, until the full rida has arrived, right? Then the difficulty to that, and they need time for adjusting themselves in a quarantine place. Then the chairman has raised her hand. Right.
2 minutes more, doctor.
How many minutes? 5 minutes.
2 minutes more, doctor.
2 minutes, okay.
Yeah.
Acceptance, all right. The acceptance, we look into the preparation. The PUS have been prepared to the important thing that they ponder. They embrace themselves on what to expect. They seek the latest advice and what they can cope. And they ask persons who have been in a quarantine center what need to be prepared. They try to overview the quarantine before they've been quarantined. They are looking forward. They set a positive minds for the quarantine. They set an expectation of the advantages and benefits because they need to have positive minds. Then they put aside, although they have some negative thoughts, but they try to put aside all these negative thoughts. And the acceptance also help when they felt grateful for the facilities provided. For the quarantine center, they have been provided with all the necessary meals, the helps and everything. The staff have been given a very positive way of helping them. For the conclusion, the research was carried to explore the adjustment of the PUS during quarantine in the quarantine center. There is various way of self-adjustment during this process. This research has also revealed some frustration, some anxiety, some depression, some negative thoughts, but all the way they have tried to adjust properly during the quarantine period. The adaptation and the process is being helped by the health workers, the counselors and the medical workers who help them. And it's not only the PUS, but for the frontliners who work with the PUS, they also need to help themselves for self-care. And Abdul Qadir 2020 suggested that the practice of zikir among COVID-19 victims of PUS as a spiritual self-care method will help reducing feeling of stress, anxious, and other psychological feeling. It is been mentioned also by the respondent of the research that when they have free time, they will be reciting the Quran, they will be performing the zikr and everything to help them to adjust to all this situation. And further studies may be conducted among other population, like workers, children, adolescents, and other mental health issues, exploring not only the adjustment, but maybe other mental health issues during the quarantine period. Well, that's all for me. Thank you very much for listening. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah. Thank you so much, Dr. Muhammad Zali Rizal, for also a very good sharing to us. And I'm quite feel guilty if I need to raise hand, or maybe I should say that maybe it's
saja mengusik pengurusi.
Just because that previously last 2 days ago, Doctor, I have been for my presentation in online also in Istanbul. I become like the last one person, and all of the other presenters already taking time too long until it was extended like 25 minutes. So it comes to me, the chairman says that I'm sorry, can you present only 5 minutes? I say, oh my God, okay, only 5 minutes I have. Okay lah, I can say that maybe I'm fortunate or maybe I'm not lucky enough lah. But anyway, Alhamdulillah, I'm so happy that all of the presenters until now can present until the end, and I think in a good pace of time lah. Alhamdulillah. Okay, thank you, Doctor. So now let's go for our next two last of our presenters, Dr. Wan Azura, with the topics of conceptual model of communication politeness based on Quranic rhetoric. Okay, silakan Dr. Wan Azura.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nur Wahida. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi, Doktor.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi.
Okay, I will present today the paper entitled Conceptual Model of Communication Politeness Based on Quranic Rhetoric and Psychology. My name is Wan Azura Ahmad, and my colleague Ahmad Fazullah Muhammad Zainal Abidin. Okay. Communication is an important part of human life. Involves career and personal, professional, formal or casual situations, face-to-face, online channels, and so on. Politeness and psychological aspects are basic principles in create harmonious communication climates. In the Islamic perspective, quality communication, psychological elements such as especially emotion and feelings and communications are emphasized in shaping the human personality and akhlaq development. introduction. However, the discussion about communication politeness with the psychological role is less discussed in the Islamic content. Even the terms communication politeness and psychology, such as emotions from an Islamic perspective and Quranic rhetoric, also contain a wide meaning and scope. So the purpose of the study is to discuss the communication politeness in the Quran, with focusing on the Quranic rhetoric, Balaghah al-Quran or Balaghah al-Quran, and the psychological aspect such as emotions. Then the paper suggests the conceptual model of communication politeness which based on Quranic rhetoric and psychological aspect. Communication politeness, a brief. The last few decades witnessed a rapid growth in research into politeness, said Al-Khatib in 2012. Politeness is fundamental for human communication insofar as it regulates social interaction and allows a smooth, easy communication, as well as avoiding interpersonal problems and establishing close relationship. Definition of politeness. Definition of politeness means the practical application of good manners or ethics and respect for the feelings of others in various settings. Okay, here we look at the ethical and practice of communication, politeness during communication process. There's a sender, message, noise, channel, receiver, feedback, and there's also ethics and practice of communication politeness based on Quranic rhetoric and psychology. We put here ethics and practice of communication politeness based on Quranic and psychology. Methodology. The study used qualitative analysis method of rhetorical verses of Quran describing education communication in Quran and focus more on communication politeness among teenagers, especially in Surah Luqman, because most of the communication strategies found in this surah, Surah Luqman. As mentioned earlier, the ethics of communication are found in several surahs in Quran, Yusuf and other surah. So we see here that on methodology here. First, we conduct the observation towards the specific phenomena and situation or cases related to the study, observing the specific cases related to the issues of communication politeness among youth, refer to the specific cases about the practice of communication politeness in the Quran. After that, we identify the pattern of the specific case and summarize the cases by formulating the tentative hypothesis related to the communication politeness. Pattern of the case related to the communication politeness refer to surah, verses, context, analyze from a rhetorical study, and categorize the element and themes of communication politeness in the Quran. And after that, do the general conclusion. Therefore, all related characteristics of communication politeness in the Quran contribute to the communication politeness studies. In addition, these characteristics can be applied to the communication ethics among youth and teenagers. Okay, the finding and conclusion. The finding and discussion, sorry. Okay. Quranic works on politeness as ethic and practice of communication politeness. We see here, before that, how to okay. Okay, first one, I will read the Quranic works on politeness as ethical and practice of communication politeness. Example of politeness in the Quran, Qawlan Sadida means speak words of appropriate justice, valid and precise. In Al-Ahzab, verses Surah and verses Al-Ahzab 33, 70. Then Qawlan Ma'rufa, speak with appropriate speech, Al-Ahzab 33 to 32. Qawlan Baligha, speak with clear, effective and far-reaching words, An-Nisa 63. Qawlan Maysura, speak with gentle word, Al-Isra 28. Udud min Sawt, use lower voice during speech, Luqman 19. Yastami'una al-qawl fayattabi'una ahsana, use best words during listening and speaking, Al-Sumar 18. Tayyib min qawl, preference to use good speech and words, Al-Hajj 24. And then Quranic words that imply psychological aspect, positive emotion during communication, like the slide before that, Nadrah wa Surur, Al-Insan 12, Farih Fakhura, Hud 10, feel happy when help others, Muhajirin helps Ansar, like Muhajirin help Ansar, Mujadalah 9, happy and sincere of Allah when give food to the needy, orphans and captive, Al-Insan 8 to 9, feel happy for achievement, An-Nahl 19:7. The third one is Quranic words on politeness that refer to Quranic rhetoric, Ilm al-Ma'ani. We put it as the strategies and methods of communication politeness. We see here the screen, strategies and methods of communication politeness in the Quran. Vocative constructions such as calling with best name, such as oh ya, ya oh, ya Rahman, ya Rahim, ya Bunayya, as mentioned in Surah Isa and Surah Luqman 13. Refer to Arabic rhetoric and Quranic rhetoric, science of ilmu al-ma'ani or an-nida, call. In Arabic we call nida, or English we say call. Second one, vocative contractions, repeating calling, frequently repeated friendly calls to build rapport and empathy, showing humility and hope, such as shown at Surah Luqman and Surah Yusuf. This is we refer to Arabic rhetoric and Quranic rhetoric. We found this is the science of al-ma'ani of at-tikrar. In Arabic we call uslub at-tikrar, or in English we call repetition. The third one is psychology of affirmation for self-reminder, a reminder to obey God, to kind to parents, to do sharing emotions of passion and gratitude, such as in Surah Luqman and Surah Al-Baqarah. This one we call science of al-ma'ani. In Arabic we call at-tawqid, or in English we call it affirmation. Then the last one, wisdom and good advice to ethical values. Good advice such as don't be arrogant, don't turn away, moderate your walking, don't raise your voice, keep it a secret. We find it in Surah Luqman, verses 13 to 19, Al-Baqarah 132, Yusuf 5. This is because science of an-nahi, prohibition, no indeed. We call English in Arabic an-nahi. Next one, summary, conceptual model of communication politeness based on Quranic rhetoric and psychology. We find here Qawlan Sadida, as I mentioned it before, the slide before. Qawlan Sadida, Qawlan Baligha, Qawlan Masura, Qawlan Layyina, Qawlan Ma'rufa, Qawlan Karima. Okay, that's all. Vocation construction, calling with best name, Ya Bunayya, vocative contraction, repeating calling. Then psychological affirmation for self-reminder, a reminder to obey God, to be kind, parents, and so on. And the last one, wisdom and ethical values such as good advice, avoid arrogance, avoid raise your voice, keep a secret. This interactive link between ethics and practice of communication politeness with strategy and methods of communication. This aspect consists the element of Quranic rhetoric and psychology. And then the last one, conclusion. Okay, the conclusion. This is the interconnection between the politeness words in the Quran and psychological aspect in producing a harmonious climate of communication. Conceptually, the politeness and psychological aspects such as emotions in the Quran give impact to human life through the analysis of Quranic Arabic rhetoric. The Quran provides guidance, strategies, and methods of communication for individuals during conversation. It is clear here that Al-Quran is the kalam Allah, which is perfect from all dimensions, whether it is laws of guidance, the beautiness of language style and word order, psychological encouragement, and ethics value. Okay, that's all for my presentation. Thank you very much. And here I put the acknowledgement. This article is a part of research entitled Model Pendidikan, Kesopanan Komunikasi Remaja, Retorik berdasarkan berasaskan retorik berdasarkan Al-Quran, funded by Ministry of Higher Education. So therefore, the researchers, all the researchers appreciate the great support of the KPT and this team. Thank you very much.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Anzura, for your presentation. Okay. Let's now go for our last papers. I don't want to waste so much time. So let's go for a paper with the topic Disability in Islam, Quran and Hadith Perspective that will be presented by our last presenter, Mr. Muhammad Misbah. Please welcome Mr. Muhammad Misbah, and you can start your presentation. Thank you. Do we have Mr. Muhammad Misbah with us to present a paper now? Yeah, I think, let me check from the list. Okay, I think maybe I can say that maybe Mr. Misbah is not here since that I called him a few times. Okay, so if like that, I think that we already finished our session today for now. Before I finish, let us open up all of our camera and maybe we can stop sharing. Dr. Wan Azura, if Dr. Don't mind, can you stop sharing, Doctor, so that we can see all of our friends? Okay, okay, let's go. Mr. Wan, can you help us to take a picture on behalf of us, Mr. Wan? Okay, mohon semua untuk buka kamera ya. Mr. Fakhrul Tahir, Miss Adriana, Amirul Syahmi, Miss Aisyah Nadira, Dr. Nasruddin, Mr. Shah Nuriman, Dr. Shah Nuriman, Mr. Danish. Right, okay, we'll take our picture now. 1, 2, 3. Okay, wait, let me share directly to the group so that all of us can take our pictures in here. And then another one. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay. With the finishing the line of this session, I would like to say thank you so much for all of the presenters for attending and present a very beneficial finding to all of us. And it makes me remind one of the good conclusion that maybe if I say it in Malay, it will be more beautiful meaning for me. I'm sorry, Mr. Ryan, you don't understand. Saya fahami bahawa dalam presentation ini dapat disimpulkan bahawa dalam satu aspek bahawa Allah telah ciptakan seluruh binaan dia sebagaimana disebutkan dalam Al-Quran di dalam salah satu daripada surah yang saya tak ingat tetapi disebutkan dalam surahnya Auzubillahi minasyaitonirrajim. Alif lam mim ra tilka ayatul kitab wallazi unzila ilaika min rabbikal haqq walakinna aktsaran nasi la yu'minun. Allahul ladzi rafa'as samawati bighairi amadin tarawnaha summa stawa 'alal 'arsy wa sakhkhara asy-syamsa wal qamar kullun yajri li ajalin musamma. Yudabbirul amra yufassilul ayati la'allakum biliqa'i rabbikum tuqinun wa huwal ladzi maddal arda wa ja'ala fiha rawasiya wa anhara wa min kulli samarati ja'ala fiha zawjayn itsnain yughshi lailan nahar inna fi zalika laayatin liqaumin yatafakkarun. Ayat ini jelas membuatkan saya faham bahawa setiap ciptaan Allah di atas binaannya di langit dan bumi semuanya berada dalam kekuasaannya. Semuanya tunduk dan patuh mengikut pada perintahnya dan setiap daripada ciptaan dan binaannya mempunyai hikmah dan keajaibannya yang tersendiri yang mana kita peroleh melalui kajian-kajian yang kita lakukan dalam research kita yang kita lakukan, sama ada di dalam bidang sains, sama ada dalam bidang sosial, sama ada di bidang humanities dan sebagainya. Semoga mudah-mudahan kajian dilakukan oleh kita semua ini memberi manfaat bukan hanya pada diri sendiri tapi juga kepada agama dan juga kepada ummah sekaliannya. Saya ucapkan ribuan terima kasih. I'm finishing my timing for us being as a moderator to say I'm sorry if I have any lack of weakness during being sharing this session. Thank you so much for everything. Inshallah, I hope to see you again in another next session. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi.